Thank you so much for joining. I'll introduce myself back with Taylor again to do this webinar. I'm Altaf. I'm the founder of Snaptrude and exciting times here. So we shipped our new version V3 in late June. It's been 2 months and we have seen so much love globally and really excited to see people do amazing projects on Snaptrude, and some of them are sharing with us and collaborating with us. And this webinar is pretty special because while we have shipped many updates since our V3 launch, we are also announcing a design competition with this webinar and showing people how best they can use Snaptrude to its full potential. From Taylor, who's a Snaptrude expert, who will show you how you can leverage Snaptrude to design various different types of projects and typologies. But this design competition is focused a lot more on the theme, which you can go to our website and landing page and download the starter kit to understand more. And we have huge prizes at the end of this competition to give away. But this webinar will be a lot more broader as well. So even if you're not participating in the competition, you'll get to learn what all Snaptrude can do, especially with a new launch, the V3 version, and all the updates that we have done in the last 2 months, even after the launch. So let's not spend more time in just me talking about things, but let's get Taylor to introduce himself and let's jump right in.
Awesome. Thanks, Altaf. Appreciate it. Hey, everyone. It is great to see some of you on the webinar. Maybe some of you are back from the last one. Either way, if it's your first time, excited to have you. I'm Taylor. I'm on the product team here at Snaptrude. Prior to jumping into the AEC tech world, I practiced architecture at Perkins & Will for about 6 years. So I know a lot of the sort of ins and outs of new softwares and adoption and learning things. So I'm excited to essentially kick off a project here in Snaptrude, show you guys around and answer any questions you have that might relate to either the webinar or modeling things. We're getting some outputs from the webinar. With that, I think we scheduled about an hour for the webinar. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll just get into a model and start looking at how you can start using Snaptrude. Let's share. And then Altaf, if you would be able to confirm with me if you guys can see.
Yes, we can. I can see it. Perfect. I'll let people in the chat
I see some
say otherwise.
Yep, I see awesome. Some thumbs up going there. Cool. So we're going to just set up a project. It's always best, I think, to start things just from a blank slate. And we'll give a little bit of an overview once we get into Snaptrude itself. For this webinar, the goal is to actually model something and get to a point where we can start looking at actual design outputs. So I'm going to keep this as simple as possible just in terms of programming and design and keep the scope pretty small so that we can get to a pretty good output towards the end, because the last thing I can imagine everyone wants to do is just see me teetering around in 3D for hours as I fine-tune something. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kickstart a project with AI. I'm going to just start this off just by quickly attaching an RFP here. And let's go to our webinar. And I've got a program created. So one thing that you can do, there's a couple ways to kick off a project. This is a newer method that we've introduced just with an AI kickoff. So I'm going to use a program that we've already created as a PDF. I'm going to open that here. And then I'm going to go ahead and load in my site really quick as well. So the place I'm using is actually in Portland, Oregon. And as I'm doing this, everyone just feel free to ask questions in the chat. Altaf and some of our other team members will be checking the chat and answering those as they come up, or if there's,
It's not showing all the windows, so we did not see your PDF. If you can show the PDF would be good.
Sure. We'll have to, I think I'll need to pull that up. That was just through the regular file explorer. I didn't actually open the PDF. It was just drag and drop into the scene. But we can, if we want, I can stop sharing after, and then maybe we can pull that up and look at it.
Sure.
Point being is that the PDF, it's not formatted in any specific way. Our AI will handle the interpretation of that PDF into a program that you can then use there. Once we get in, you'll see what it converts it to and how that looks. So I've got a site spec that I've been looking at over here. It's across the street from another international school. So it seemed like a good place to put a very innovative kindergarten. So what I could go ahead and do is we'll grab in some of the context, and you'll have the option if you want to include property parcels here. So these will be pulled in. This will be really helpful for infill sites or areas in more dense jurisdictions. For now, I'm actually just going to leave them off just because I want a little bit more freedom to explore the site and how this integrates there. So I'm going to go ahead and click on load site. The program, and again, thank you for the reminder. We'll try and pull that up at the end so you can see what it looks like. But the program should specify all the spaces, and I'm actually not going to give it a prompt because I've already provided the program here. So I'm going to go ahead and click start. I'm going to use a space first planning approach, which is going to mean that basically just going to be taking all of the blocks that we create from this program and organizing them in a way that we'll get to a building output. So what this is going to do is essentially exactly what it says on screen. It's going to read our document, create the requirements, and then calculate all of our targets, and then place these on the canvas for us. It's not fun watching things load. So while we're doing this, and while this is loading up, should just take a minute or so, I can show you the output that we'll be working towards. So this presentation here is ultimately what we'd like to get to today on the webinar. It's a very short amount of time, so I'm hoping we can achieve all this, but this is a good sampling of what you can see when you're in Snaptrude. But I'm seeing some messages here that some might be able not be able to see.
I'm able to see. Can people confirm if others are able to see? I think others are able to see. Yeah.
Cool. All right. I would be horribly sad if we went the whole presentation with no one being able to see. Okay, cool. So we can see the renderings and the sort of presentation output that we're working towards. Awesome. So with that, this is where we'll be working towards today, the outputs that we're hoping to get to, and we'll just walk through the process, answer any questions along the way, and then hopefully get to something that looks nice and pretty for our presentation. So let's jump back to our model here, and we're essentially close to tail end of the calculations. And then once we have this in place, we'll be able to start modeling. So cool. We got everything complete. I'm going to go ahead and launch the project. And what this is going to do is it's going to put us in Snaptrude's program mode. So this is essentially the first of 4 design modes that we have, in case you're not familiar with Snaptrude. So what we've asked the AI to do is essentially build our program for us based on the RFP that we've provided. And so we can take a look at the program here. There's a lot of depth that we could get into, and you could almost spend a whole webinar just getting into the program. But point being is that we've essentially interpreted all of these spaces from our RFP import into departments, which are the colored labels here, and then spaces, which you can see on the left side. They'll also give the area achieved per room as well as the total room count as a target here. So this is, for the sake of this model, probably the most we wanted to get into program right now, just because I do want to show you guys what it actually looks like to create a design concept. So with that, program mode is one of those modes where it's its own environment, but it's actually directly linked to our design canvas. So if I jump over to the design canvas, I'm going to get an option here. You can essentially choose to design at a department level or at a space level. So departments are going to be those higher level things, you know, like administration, and then the spaces will be the individual spaces within that. So just for this one, what I'd like to do is actually design with departments today, and then show you how you can start to incorporate those and start space planning with those. I'm going to go ahead and click get started here. And then what you'll see is we've got our site pulled in that I spec'd at the very beginning. And then if I zoom in, we've got a series of department level objects. So these objects are going to essentially encompass all of the area of the spaces that we've specified in the program mode and give us the ability to start blocking and stacking with them in a very simple way. So I'm going to leave these here for now. Just a quick overview of the Snaptrude canvas and how things work. You can always toggle back to program mode if you do need to, or if you want to change things. And I'll show you what that looks like in a sec and how you can go back and forth a little bit. But then we've also got a quick areas dashboard on the side, so we can start to see the area reports and essentially add those up in different ways. So for this, since we're doing departments, we'll go ahead and add our department level view, and we can see our gross areas tallying at 100% here. What we'll do is just start massing a concept with the intent of sticking roughly to some of our competition guidelines where we're looking at an educational typology. So for this, I mentioned it's going to be kindergarten. We'll try and keep it pretty small. So I think I spec'd this for about 100 students. So getting into it, I always like to just set things up based on the orientation that I'm going to be drawing in. So I'm actually going to rotate my site really quick, and then we'll do 45 like this. And so one thing to note, as you rotate your site, we do have a solar analysis and some additional tools there. When you rotate the site, that's all going to be rotating with it. So you don't need to worry about realigning the sun paths or anything along those lines, just for future reference. But now what I'm going to do is actually just start modeling. So Snaptrude has a lot of simple but powerful modeling tools that'll essentially let us start to get in and create a design concept here, right? So I've got my line tool selected, and I'm actually going to draw with an offset here. And I'm going to use 35 feet for my offset. And let's start here. I actually want to change the offset direction. So we'll go about 200 feet this way. And if anyone has questions as we go, feel free. I know some of this will be me modeling and then others will be answered questions. So happy to answer those as we come along. Yeah, I don't know if I like that as much. Cool. So as I do this, the whole intent for this right now is essentially just to design a massing envelope that gets us to roughly the overall area that we're trying to target with our program. So I can go ahead and I can check and I can see we've got our external area spec'd out at 15,000. On our internal area, we're looking pretty close. Let's go to this department object here, 13.5. So we can go ahead and use edit tool and adjust the edges of this. And I saw a question in chat just about whether or not this will be reflected in 3D, and the answer is yes. This will be reflected in the 3D design modes as well. We can actually take a look at that right now and get this essentially placed on the site a little bit better. So if we assume after a series of iteration that this is the overall shape we like, we could jump to our 3D and we can actually take a look and we can see we've got our topo solid imported. Our site is floating in the air right now. This is because we haven't set the datum for the ground level. So what we could go ahead and do is do that really quick. Once I select the topo solid, there's several options that we can use here if we want to introduce fade to help style it better, or if we have below grade and we want to reduce the opacity and show that, we can do that as well. Those are customizable. You can also toggle between flat elevation, satellite view, and turn the buildings off or on. So all of this is preference, just depending on what you typically prefer to design with. But for now, in order to start really designing and creating a concept out of this, I'm going to use the update datum. So what this will do is essentially just set the region that we're selecting on our topo solid to the ground level of our building. So once we have this roughly placed, we'll start to massage this and form it a little bit more as we go. So let's do one more thing. I want to adjust this a tiny bit. So now you can see, to answer that question, we do have that model in 3D shown. We can perform a lot of the same edits in 3D as I was in 2D. So in the push-pull tool, I can go ahead and grab this edge. As I do all of this, we can always toggle back to the areas panel here and just check and confirm how our areas are looking. One thing that I want to do is increase the floor height in our stories panel. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll just say 14 feet for this. And at this point, I'm not really introducing the departments just yet, and that's intentional because I want to get, this is a design competition after all, so I want to focus more on the design right now and then get the program integrated after, right? For this, we've come up with a pretty simple concept that we can model pretty quickly. So what I'm going to do is actually add a quick mask for the roof here. And let's go ahead and do this up. So I can use Control Up and I can just copy this directly up. One thing to note that's helpful if you do have a multi-story building in your proposal, if you use the copy vertical tool, it's going to create an instance version of this. So as I adjust this, it's going to modify the floor below. Since we just want the shape of it for now, I'm going to go ahead and make this a unique object to essentially detach it. So all these are going to have space properties. They're going to be just default tags for now, and that's totally fine, just as we're iterating initially. I'm going to go ahead and turn the height so it's not synced to our story anymore. And let's just add, we'll convert this to a little bit of a roof plane here. And then I'm going to go ahead and do an offset, and we'll just get a little overhang on the edges for the design concept. Let's say 4. And then I'm going to Boolean these. So in 3D, we have some good Boolean tools to essentially help you create these objects. So now we're humming along and getting the overall design concept placed. Last thing that I'll probably want to do is just integrate this with the ground a little more and then add some sites. I'm going to copy one version below, and then I'm going to do the same. And I'm going to make this unique. And then we're just going to push and pull this in a little bit. Again, because so much of this is based on that really early stage design, there's a lot of flexibility with how you go about modeling and here, and how you go about massing these concepts out. So now that we have an overall massing in place, I want to start incorporating some more landscape type objects here and essentially get to the point where we can add a playground and some outdoor activities for the kids in this process. I just want to check my Zoom is a little bit frozen. In the chat, is it freezing for anyone else before I get too far down the line?
Yes, it is. It's frozen, Taylor. I think you should stop your screen share and do it. Zoom sometimes creates this.
Restart it. Yeah, let's see if that resets things a little bit here. Am I still freezing up a little bit?
Yes.
All right, let's see here. What is going on with my Zoom? Give me one quick second and I'll try and see if I can come up with a quick fix. Okay, is my audio a little better now?
Yes, much better.
I'm wondering if my camera is just fighting with the Zoom for bandwidth. I might try and do this with camera off and see if that improves. Let me try sharing my screen again. Sorry, guys. Okay, can we see this okay? Is it smooth? Any issues?
We can see it.
Perfect. So I was just mentioning how we were going over some of the massing. Was there anything that I could rewind to help clarify? I know that we froze up a little bit, so I just want to make sure that I don't leave anyone hanging if there's any area that we missed in particular to get to this point.
I think you can resume. You were fairly okay even
Okay.
till the time you froze up.
Awesome. I noticed I looked over to the side and I saw things were getting a little bit slow. So cool. If that's good, I'm going to go ahead and continue. And what I would go ahead and do is jump into our plan view. And I'm just going to plan essentially like a simple site that we can start to add a playground and some of the outdoor spaces from our program for the kids. So I'm going to use an arc tool here, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn off our offset. And we're going to create a site object out of this. Ready. And then we'll complete the line with our line tool. So as I'm doing this, we're building a site object that we can essentially just come off and branch off to. So we'll try and create sort of a tiered concept for this. And then we'll come back over here. Cool. So now we'll complete this, then we'll get our site objects in place. And then we can jump back to 3D. So now that we've got this in place, we're coming up to a point where we might like the overall massing concept that we have in place. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move this down to the level below. So I'm going to use our move tool, and then I'm going to click on the lock to the vertical axis. We'll go ahead and we'll just move this down 15 feet to sync up with that level below. So now that we've got this in place, one thing that we can do is I want to add just a little bit of depth to the scene to help illustrate the massing concept. So I'm going to hide this really quick, and then we're just going to extrude some of these using the push-pull tool. Okay. So now I will unhide. And then what we can do is we can actually start to integrate this with the site a little bit better. So what I'll do now is I'm going to go ahead and click the cut and fill tool. And this is going to give me the chance to select spaces that we would like to essentially imprint onto the topo solid to clear essentially a building pad for us. So I'm going to go ahead and click apply here to the cut and fill regions. And then what we'll see is this is start to carve out the area for our building. So we don't have any of those spatial overlaps or anything along those lines here anymore. And we're starting to get to a point where we've got a building concept that feels nice and nested within the site. Obviously, if we had more time than an hour, I'd likely go in and add a lot more detail here. But if we can say we're happy with this as an overall massing concept, the next step would actually be jumping in and starting to incorporate the program blocks that we have over here with the actual mass that we've created. So in order to do that, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a new department object, and I'm just going to call this envelope. So this will be our building envelope. And then we'll assign this, and then I'll call this envelope. That way we don't have any confusion. And once I do that, this is actually going to convert this to what we call a department object. So it'll be the same object type as all of these over here, but this is going to just encompass essentially all the space that we're hoping to plan out. So I'm going to do the planning portion now and jump into primarily 2D to do that. So once I go in 2D, we can see the envelope here. I can also see the below grade space that we've planned out, which is essentially just a mass right now. And the first thing that I think I'd like to do is just plan the circulation for this so that we can start putting the spaces in after. So in order to do that, I'm going to grab the offset tool really quick. I'm going to select this edge and I'm going to offset, we'll just say 10. And now as I do this, it's going to split the envelope space into separate components for us so that we can work with this and essentially start trimming this out. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll add some circulation down to the tail end here. So let's use our line tool, and I'm going to draw with one more offset, and we'll say 10 feet. Let's make sure we're on the right side here. Cool. And we can use our snaps, and let's actually go a little bit further. I want to do it this way. But you know what? Let me think about this really quick. We want to do from this line. Sorry, guys. There we go. So what we'll do is we'll plan some circulation here. This is going to trim the space out just like we did. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the erase edge and erase this edge. So now this is just another envelope object, but we could go ahead and we could call this circulation if we'd like to, just so that we have that called out here within our spaces. And I'll create a new department as well, just to recategorize that. And the main reason I do this is just for organization. We'll jump back into program mode and you'll see that these are starting to get tallied in our program areas as well. So this just helps as we're designing things, essentially be able to track the spaces and what the efficiency ratio is of circulation to spaces as well. So now that we have this in place, we know that we're working with a 10-foot corridor. We've got a 35-foot offset, and we've got 25 feet to play with for all of our programming. So what I'm going to do is jump back into program mode really quick. And I'm going to click this expansion over here. And I'm going to go in and actually start editing some of the dimensions of the spaces to be 25 feet here. So if I go ahead and change our width here to 25, you'll see that we're going to adjust all the additional dimensions of the spaces here. And so this is going to help us begin programming these blocks a little bit easier because we can basically just drag and drop them right on top of the spaces. We'll just do this really quick, a couple more. So there's several ways that you can do this. I'm just editing just the width of all these just because I want them to be one standard module. So as I update all of these to 25, we can jump back into our tab here. You can see that our spaces are overlapping a little bit. That's fine for now, because what I'm going to do is show you the method for how you could go about essentially using these in space planning. So we've got them. They're all these sort of long blocks. They're 25 feet wide. It looks weird when they're not planned, but when they are planned, they should fit nicely within our envelope here. So I am going to rotate these. We'll do 90 degrees really quick. And then just to show you one thing that does help, a lot of times space planning, there's a little bit of a figuring out period where you're trying to understand sort of what spaces should go next to each other. So we've actually built in something called AI adjacencies. So with all of our departments selected, what I can go ahead and do is I can actually compute the adjacencies between the spaces. And this is going to suggest which spaces should be next to each other as we go planning this building. And so we'll run this first, and then we'll arrange them so we can get essentially a more clear view of how we want to diagram this and break it down into our program. And then I'll start adding these into our building envelope here. So this will take just a moment to compute, and then we'll rearrange everything and then get this into an envelope and then show you how to get some presentation outputs, which should be pretty fun. Normally it'll take a minute or so, so shouldn't be too much longer. Are there any questions in the chat that I could jump in and answer while we're waiting for this?
Yes, just one question, which is what rules or code is it's using to identify the relation of spaces. So if you can see, Taylor, you want to show the references so people have context?
Yeah. So there's a series of primary data sources that it'll pull in depending on the areas. So it'll give you essentially all of the references and the data sources that it's pulling from. So it's not inventing things, it is pulling from actual documentation and specific requirements depending on the typology as well that you specified there. So we've got these, I rotated them, so it looks a little bit silly here, but if we go ahead and arrange them, this is going to create what looks essentially like a spatial planning or adjacency diagram, but this is going to be just directly live linked to all the spaces that we have. So now you can see all of the departments, at least, organized in a way where we're essentially suggesting, hey, these spaces need to be connected in a strong way. These spaces need to be connected in a non-direct way. So the way that we are breaking this down, these solid lines indicate a strong connection. So the outdoor and play equipment being connected to the classrooms, bathrooms and washrooms being connected to classroom areas are musts for the planning. And then there's basically non-direct adjacencies, which it suggests. And then the last thing it'll also give you is the restricted adjacencies. So this is things that you don't typically want to have next to certain areas. So like reception next to the dining and kitchen facilities, or the bathrooms next to the reception, right? A couple different ways we can go about this. It'll give you a lot of adjacencies to start off with. You can click them and you can actually just delete to remove some of these. If there's more nuanced planning or specific information that you have that is more related to your overall design, you can go ahead and you can essentially remove a lot of these adjacencies and then you can recompute it, right? Given a lot of this, you can start to take this logic and start to actually break it down and add it into your envelope, right? What I'm going to go ahead and do here is actually start planning some of these spaces within the design. We'll turn the adjacencies off. I just wanted to show that as like a high level, and we'll start planning some things out. So we'll get our classrooms and learning areas placed here first. This is a pretty long bar essentially. So I'll use the line tool, turn our offset, and we can choose to split space on overlap. So essentially dual function. So what I'll do is I'll split this here, and we'll go ahead and we'll move our classrooms. And we'll just begin placing these all within our envelope here. So this will take a little bit to get some of this quickly placed. But again, I've really wanted in this webinar to be able to show you guys a full sort of modeling experience as well. While I'm doing this, I'll talk if there are other questions that people might have. We can definitely jump into those now as well, just because we're going to take a quick second to space plan this.
I think this was a question which you're actually demonstrating is how do you take the department objects that we created and how do you put it into the envelope, which you're demonstrating. One last question which I have, which is, do I need to drop an email for PDF as well as RFP? I didn't really quite get the question, but I'm assuming that this is related to the design competition. For that, once you submit your name for the competition, you will get an email with RFP. Hope that answers. But you can continue, Taylor. I think most of the questions are being handled.
Cool. And we'll go ahead and add some of these in. So we can add some of this. And one thing that's nice about this too is we are adding the blocks in, but once you get them placed, it's really easy to use the edit tool. All of these are going to be essentially aware of the adjacencies here. So it becomes a little bit easier to go in and start programming these. So I'm going to be quick. Some of the things that I add might be a little bit silly, but we'll go ahead and I just want to get this all implemented so we can get to what I call a satisfying output. So in some cases, you might not want to directly add something in, or you might want to change things up. Another option that you have too with the line tool is you could go ahead and we could turn off split space. We could just draw the space manually if we wanted to. So we'll go ahead in here. We'll close this off. This is going to build a new default space for us. I can go ahead, call this library, and we're just going to replace the object. Library and reading zone. And now that we've got that placed here, we can adjust the edges, right? So we can get this essentially synced up to the same target here. So we can remove this as we need, and then we can go ahead.
Can you show the target and achieve a little bit more deeply? Because there was a question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see in the gross external area, this is where all the departments are going to be reported. So you can see on this right panel, this is going to tell us essentially how close we are to hitting our target. Just due to time constraints, we probably won't hit 100% on all of them, but we'll try and get as close as possible, right? So you can see the ones that we have edited, like the library and reading areas are at 78% there, the administration's at 65%. So this gives us a good idea of essentially like how this is panning out and how the design is coming along overall. So let's go ahead and pull in some reception. And we can do the same thing for this. We'll go ahead and we'll just redraw this space, make it a little bit easier. And we'll assign this department here. And then let's call this. So one thing to note, just a little nuance, when I change this label to match the label to match the department, it's going to convert this to a department object itself. So it makes it a little bit easier to essentially toggle between space objects and department objects here. Last thing, let's go ahead and get some medical, and we'll add our bathrooms might be a little bit undersized, but that's okay for now. So we'll convert this to our storage rooms. What we can also do is we can just drag and drop some spaces, push things in as we need, and then we can start joining objects. So let's do this really quick. Convert this, and let's union these. And then we'll go to space and storage. Cool. So we got our storage rooms placed. Let's reduce this. And then last would be bathroom and washroom. So let's go ahead and add this in here. And we'll size this. If we want to go, we've got a story below that we can start planning out. But for this exercise, we'll probably just stick to the singular story. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to move this really quick and split it in half. So this is a little bit of a blended process where we're using both the envelope and the design first approach, but then also the spaces themselves in a space first planning approach. So we'll go ahead and we'll trim that really quick. I'm going to delete this. And then I'll add another little space here. And I think that should get us roughly to where we want to be. Cool. So now that we've got this, we've got our outdoor place area already spec'd within the site. We could change that if we want to. Likely what I would do is put the multi-purpose area up below. So I'm going to move these off to the side because I want to show the planning of one floor without necessarily showing you, the entire thing here, just so that we can make sure we get to some of the outputs and how you actually go about creating a presentation to submit for the competition. So if we jump into our 3D view here, we can see now that those departments are essentially assigned to our spaces, and we've got everything reading as well as we want. This default object right here is causing some area issues. So we can actually convert the default object to a massing object since it's not actually a space. So I'll convert this to a mass really quick. And then we're going to start to get a little bit closer on our area. So we do have an unplanned space down here that we can start converting as well. But overall, with the massing in place, typically what you want to start doing now is getting into adding any sort of elements to essentially take this into views and start creating a presentation out of it. So for the last 15 minutes, I'm going to set up some views and then we'll jump into present mode and show you how you can get to hopefully an output that looks pretty close to what I presented at the beginning. So what I'll do is I'll add just a couple of trees to the scene here. Let's go ahead and get into our furniture. We'll have the landscape. We'll choose some simple trees. We can place these as needed around the site. Let's jump into a slower plan here and check. Okay, cool. We'll add some more trees to the lower plan. So you can get pretty in depth with this between adding trees and people to the scene. This helps initially with just selling overall scale of the project vision, getting some simple vignettes out the door. But what this also helps with is later when we do some of our AI inspirations, the trees and the people help set scale a little bit as well. So we'll be able to start adding that and seeing the effects of that overall. But what I'm going to do now is essentially start saving a couple of views out that we'd like to use within our present mode. So first view that I'm going to save is going to be an aerial view. So what I'm going to do is change our view settings here. I want to go from department because I don't want any of the colors or the opacity there to textured mode. One thing to note with textured mode, if we had more time, you do have the opportunity to essentially paint materials and colors and subdivide the spaces here. So that's something that you could certainly do within the design competition, just being able to select materials. This is going to work very similar to SketchUp in terms of how it works and how you would apply stuff to faces. So something you could certainly do to add those there. You can do by face or by object. For now, we're just going to leave this as really simple imagery. And I'm also going to go do a quick shadow study on this. So I'll turn our shadow study on. I can run the analysis. And this will essentially just give us a good idea of what the project looks like through different times of year. For diagrams, when you're working on the presentation, if you'd like, you can turn on like a sun path diagram. So this will be synced to the site. That'll be scaled to encompass the full site as well. So just something to keep in mind. But as I have this, what I want to do is start saving out some views with the sun and start getting some things set up. So let's go pick a good time of year. Just that looks nice and good. Okay. So we'll say we like this view. In order to save this, I'll go back to our views. Got our 3D views here. I'm just going to click plus and we'll save this. 3D view 1, we can rename this overview. And then we could head to another part of the model. And let's go on this side and we'll do the same. And we could call this drone or aerial. And then with these in place, we could go ahead and we could even add one other view if we wanted to. It's a more simple sort of ground level vignette, right? Let's get this over here. We'll set something like this. And I'll click the plus. We'll save this view out really quick. And I will rename this vignette. And then the final thing that I'm going to want to do is we'll want to pull plan into this presentation. So I'm going to go to our plan right here. I'm going to turn this analysis off. And we're going to toggle back into our department view mode because we want some of the colors here. And then we're actually going to hide the site. So as I'm doing all this, we're going to hide those trees as well. As I'm doing all of this, what it's doing is essentially letting me create a new view here. So I can go ahead in our view settings. We have default plan views, and I can create a new view that's going to save these options in terms of what's being shown. So I'm going to click on Save Plan View, and we're just going to call this Plan Diagram. And I'll talk if there's anything that anyone has questions on as I'm doing something, feel free to stop me. But now, all these views, yeah, go for it.
Which you might answer soon enough was on bubble diagrams. But I think once you get to present mode, maybe you can start with an early version of bubble diagram and then continue.
Yep, absolutely. The bubble diagrams will look a little bit weird once we've gotten things into place. I'm just going to hide this really quick. But I'll show you essentially how you can do that, how you can do rounded corner diagrams as well as bubble diagrams. So we'll go update this view really quick. And then now we can jump into present mode. We've got, I think, 3 3D views, 1 plan, and we'll go start building out just 1 sheet for a presentation that we might want to use. So we'll pull this up. The first time you open present mode, try and add some helpful diagrams that just help to communicate the program in a more visual way. So it'll auto-generate all of the spaces and departments that we have. We still have that envelope object there. One thing that you can do once you plan that envelope object to a certain level, if you wanted to, you could actually remove it because theoretically all of your spaces are now making up the envelope itself. So there's a lot of different ways you can start to use this, but these views will auto-generate if it's something that you'd like to use. But what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll create a new sheet. So I'm just going to click new sheet here. I'm going to turn margins off just to keep it nice and clean. And then we can go ahead and we can start pulling in all of the content that we want to include on this sheet itself. So that content for this presentation is going to include a mix of actual views from our model, as well as things that, that we might want to pull from other sources. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull in our plan diagram, and I'll show you some of the rounded corners and options that we have there. So we've got this pulled in. Pull this off to the side before we place it on the scene. And we can change the scale as we need to. So we can jump up in scale, down in scale, however we need. We'll do 1/32 for this. We can change our labels to regular label sizes. And then as you come in, if there's any clipping or anything, you can adjust all the labels themselves and start planning this. So a lot of the idea here is trying to internalize some of the process that might have to be done manually in InDesign and having links copy and paste it over. So being able to internalize a lot of that here. We don't need the envelope label here, but we're getting a good overview of the spaces from a conceptual level. So one thing that you can do here, and this relates directly to the bubble diagram question, you can have a block view, you can have a rounded corners view, where you can actually change the corner radius. So this is helpful if you have really large scale buildings where you need a larger radius to show. So we can adjust the radius. This will start getting you to more shaped bubble diagrams. But if you'd like to show like a true bubble adjacency diagram, maybe earlier on within the design process, you could go ahead and do that just by selecting bubble diagram. So this looks slightly silly just because we've already gotten past this sort of initial bubble diagram phase. So typically you'd use this for that really early adjacency planning. Ideally, right after you use the AI adjacencies would be a good time to use this. But then you can jump into rounded corners as you start to get more formulation of a floor plan and design concept in place here. We'll leave this off to the side for now. I can double click in just to trim or just to adjust the crop regions. And then I'll quickly go ahead and pull in all the other content that we want to include here. So let's go and in our views, let's add our overview. Oops, I'll place that outside. And so the overview will just pull in essentially the view that we've saved from the design mode here. Taking a little bit. Get some of this placed as well. So we can scale this, get it placed. Let's add our drone shot and then a vignette as well. So now we've got all these essentially set in our scene. I could go ahead and start roughly placing them on the sheet just as I prefer. I've got a little bit of a design in mind. Obviously, the process once you're creating these sheets and designing them would be a little bit more iterative here. So what we go ahead and do is we can add these to our sheet. Let's go here. And then now if we want to, what we could do is we could also go ahead and pull in some other views from even outside of Snaptrude, right? This includes things like, sorry, my Alexa is talking to me. This includes things like design inspiration that you might have pulled from Pinterest or somewhere else, or even a title block that you want to include from a different presentation, or other diagrams that help to communicate things, right? You won't see this on the side. I've got my file explorer pulled up with a project. I'm just going to go ahead and just drag and drop some assets that we are using for essentially inspiration into the scene. We'll add a title block really quick. And if you have an SVG or like a firm standard title block that you'd like to use, you can certainly use that here. We'll just go ahead and add this to the scene, create this, and I'll move this to the back. And we'll start just essentially fine-tuning this presentation as we go. Again, this is one of the moments where I'll be doing a little bit of work. Altaf, if there is questions, probably a good time to be able to answer some of the questions from the chat.
Yeah, I have been answering a few questions. I think there's just recent one. Does it have a ruler or snap? I assume this is in the present mode. We don't have a specific ruler or snap. Like snapping is there, like you can snap everything to center, corner, etc. But we don't explicitly have a ruler, but all of these sheets come with their own scale, and even the views have their own scale and dimensions. Hope that answers the questions. Yeah.
Cool. So now we're getting this laid out. You can see we're pulling in sources from everywhere. So you could use this just as much for mood boarding as you could for overall design concept. We've got a fun.
Taylor, can you cover how did you import the title block? Can you actually talk about how to import anything into present mode?
Yeah.
PDFs, images.
Absolutely. A couple ways to go about that. You can import those. I typically always just drag and drop things just because it's easier and I have that open. But you can also use the asset button here, and this will just let you essentially go into your file explorer, pull in all those assets. That'll basically just pull it up. There's two ways to do it. So you can either click this button, open your window up for your file explorer, or you can just drag and drop things directly onto the scene as well. So those are the two ways to go about that. So let's send this to the back really quick. And let's go ahead and fine tune this. I'm actually pretty excited that we're able to get to this point of the presentation. Let's send this even further back, do some layering. Altaf will tell anyone on the call that as an architect, I tend to be a perfectionist, and sometimes it comes to my detriment, like when you're on webinars and you want to make something perfect, but you also need to move the ball forward a little bit. So we've got this set up, we've got our scene in place, things are starting to look good. This is a huge difference between what we looked at before, where we've pulled a lot of these assets in.
Taylor, one more question.
Absolutely.
How did you drag and drop? Basically, the question is, do you just drag and drop in present mode? And can you show how to save a view again? Can you just create one plan view and 3D view and just drop it in to present mode?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, yeah, the title block, all of that is just by just dragging that from your file explorer. So if you have an image file or an SVG, you can pull that in and it'll reference that title block for you.
Actually, the Snaptrude views.
Oh yeah, Snaptrude views, sure. So as far as Snaptrude views go, if we wanted to go into 3D, say, maybe we want to actually use this as a really clean ortho diagram view. I could go ahead in here, I could set the view that I want. And if you go to your view settings panel, you'll see this 3D views drop down here. I'm just going to go ahead and click on the plus sign. We'll save that as 3D view 4. You can rename it if you want. But then when you jump back into present mode, you'll see that as an option here, right? So we can see 3D view 4, and I can go ahead and just drag this off to the side as we need. So same view brought in. If there are updates to the views as you're designing and modeling, you can click on any view and just click on update view, and this will change the view settings, or if there's been geometry changes. The idea being here is that oftentimes you'll want to show design evolution, and you might have multiple presentations in one scene. So this gives you the ability to control when a scene updates and when it doesn't, right? So once we get to this point, this is pretty close to the layout that we want to use. The last thing that I think will be really exciting for everyone to see and really beneficial for the competition would actually be going ahead and starting to show some of the what we call AI inspirations. So this gives you the opportunity to render over any image on the canvas. And I'm just going to copy these down so we can see how this works. Any image on the canvas with AI. If you've been following things, we use Nano Banana for these. And Nano Banana creates some really awesome renders and imagery. So I have, with any rendering platform, there's a little bit of prompt craft to getting the best results out of Nano Banana. With this specific image gen model, I always like to explain the scene as if I'm telling it to an intern who might not know exactly what they need to do. So I try and explain it in a way that's very prescriptive and telling what we're looking for. So in this case, we're taking this 3D view and we say, convert this into a photorealistic aerial render with realistic materials, solar panels, green roofs, and replace the Google terrain with natural forested context. So I can go ahead and click on enter here. what this is going to do is take this prompt and create an output based on the input that we're providing it. With most AI image trends, sometimes there's a little bit of back and forth or trial and error in order to get to those outputs, but you can start to see really quickly how this is interpreting the geometry that we have on scene, and as well as just respecting the prompts that we've given it overall, right? So if we'd like to, I could probably sit here for a couple hours and reprompt and create views, but for the sake of the demonstration and for this, let's go ahead and just create a couple. So that was a realistic view that we want. If we want to run one more just for fun, because I like to, we'll go ahead and do that. But now let's go ahead and we can go ahead and add like a watercolor rendering. So we'll do these as these sort of side views as watercolor imagery. So what I'll do is I've got another prompt created. So we can see we've got two options here. I actually think this one's more relevant to context, so we might use this one. So with these, we'll do watercolor. I'll do the same thing. I've got a prompt that I've been working on that gets good results. So it's the exact same prompt that we gave it before. Big difference is that we are going to use a felt tip pen and watercolor style. This, for some reason, just looks really awesome when you prompt it with AI. We'll do that, and we'll actually run this one here at the same time. And then what we can do from here is essentially just go replace those views on our design canvas, right? So this is just a really cool way to be able to start communicating these early stage designs where they might not have the same level of detail that a later stage model will have, but especially when you're trying to sell like an early stage proposal, being able to get something like this without having to add this level of detail is huge for design teams. So let's go ahead and pull these back in and just replace the scenes.
Taylor is adding this, just a couple of things which I wanted to share. So you can see AI now throughout Snaptrude in various forms, right from creating the program to creating these renders and view styles, as well as adjacencies and helping you with space planning. But there is a version which we have been working very hard towards. I posted a very simple preview about it on my LinkedIn. We will be launching it early next month on World Architecture Day, which is 6th of October. We will make that announcement and ship our new AI version. And whatever you see here, it's going to be like 10x way more powerful than whatever you have seen so far. The version that is coming up in next month. We will open up the webinar for that. So we will announce it to everybody and showcase it live on a webinar like this. Really look forward to seeing you all come to that. And we are very excited to show what AI would look like in the architecture world, which nobody has gone so far doing it. So just to give you a little bit more preview, the program which was created initially was through a prompt or an RFP. And we only were able to create a program, but the idea is, can you actually get into a full design presentation or a design proposal right from that prompt without a user having to touch Snaptrude at all? So how far can the AI go? And that's what the first version of our AI module would look like next month. So really excited about it. And another announcement which I wanted to make specific to the design competition is, since you see a lot of the AI features are in our pro mode, so anybody who's participating in the competition will have access to our pro mode till the end of the competition, which is October end. So if you are not able to access the pro version, please write to communications@snaptrude.com and somebody from our team will enable the pro version. But the moment you register, you should automatically get access to a pro version as part of the design competition. Go ahead, Taylor. Sorry to interrupt.
Sure. While you're doing that, I was going to get a Google VO prompt running in the background. So this is kind of the last thing, the really fun thing that we've been working on. There's a really cool workflow here where you can go from this to this or this to even a different design style. We've also integrated recently Google VO3. So what that'll do is basically give you an opportunity to take these really awesome views that you're getting from Google's Nano Banana and actually create some really simple sort of short video overviews of it. Back when I practiced, I would be doing these in Lumion and they would take weeks and lots of frustration and lots of asset placement. Having the ability to do this in an early stage design presentation without it necessarily needing to detail that model, but being able to be as prescriptive as you want with that prompt is something that has been hugely exciting to watch evolve. So hopefully you guys will get a chance to do this. The Google VO prompts, just a heads up, because it's generating a video in the background, tend to take a little bit. So while this is running, we're right at the end of the webinar. We might have, I think, 10 minutes left. But if there are questions or anything along those lines, Altaf, again, now's a really good time to do that while we wait for this to load.
Yes, I think we have answered a lot of questions. I think there was a question which is, can the Snaptrude suggest a smart way to divide the spaces in the program? Taylor, you want to answer this?
So the spaces within the program, as far as how they're being divided, it will suggest spatial layout. So what you can do is the same way that we were just looking at adjacencies, you can actually run that with spaces. And so there's another approach to design within Snaptrude where if you are very keen on understanding the very specific nuances of the program and the spaces that you have on scene, you can run the same adjacency analysis on spaces themselves, and those spaces will make up a department object. So whenever you're importing anything into Snaptrude's program mode, it's automatically going to create the department level hierarchy as well as the space level hierarchy. And those spaces essentially together make up that department. So hopefully that helps. There's not necessarily a way to directly split the department automatically, but there is the ability to suggest the proposed adjacencies for the spaces that you have once you get to that level of granularity, essentially. Cool, this is done. Look how fun this is. Wow. Yeah, it's going to take our view here and essentially recreate this as a fly through. And yes, you can export the video. So if you double click into it, you can go ahead and click these buttons here, and you can go ahead and download it there. So you can prompt these videos. It's pretty fun to explore as far as like design outputs go, but really helpful just for communicating design vision overall as well. That's the quick overview. I'm really excited we got to build a presentation and we got to do it all live. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate dealing with my frozen screen as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Taylor, always, it was a great flow to see. Literally from an RFP, we were able to get so far, less than an hour, actually. That's impressive. Hope everybody signs up and starts using Snaptrude to actually do your presentations and your proposals and design concepts as fast as Taylor can do now. Yeah, if you've seen Snaptrude doing it in the old way, should feel archaic. That's what everybody who uses Snaptrude says. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. One more question. How did you curve the edges? Taylor, do you just want to quickly show in,
Yeah, of course.
I think it's in the design mode, or is it in the present mode? Let's do it in the present mode first.
I think that there might have been asking about the diagram view. So this is in the styles. You can change from block to rounded corners. And then you can also change the corner radius as well. So if you wanted, this will look weird, but you can go really high with corner radius. So depending on how you're planning, how you're designing things, you can control that. It just depends overall on the scale of your design. You wouldn't be using 10 for this level of design. But if you're doing a project that's 4 times as large, that radius there might actually be ideal. So that's how you have the radius. If that's not what you were asking as far as the rounded corners, we can also go back and look at design mode if that was a question. But yeah, now you can implement videos in these presentations, which is honestly really wild.
And you can also export the sheets into a PDF on the top with a export button. And there's another question about analysis report, which I've answered. So when you run the analysis, you can just save the view exactly like how Taylor saved these 3D views on the left. And you can just like drag and drop them into the present mode. And they'll come with the analysis. And they also come with a small legend to explain the analysis as well automatically. Awesome. Cool. I guess that is all the questions. And again, this is amazing. We will send over a video of this webinar, and excited for everybody to participate in the competition and jump into using Snaptrude. And look out for another email on our AI launch next month. Yeah, that's it from our side.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you. Yes, Mel, go ahead. If you have a question, you can type it in and we'll try to answer. Yes, we do have export through a plugin inside Revit. Again, that's available in the Pro plan, but if you're participating in the competition, you'll have access to it. Can you just show Taylor how to download that plugin? And there's also a YouTube playlist which very clearly explains how the entire interop with Revit works. I'll just drop the link to that playlist as well so you can see it at your own pace. But here's how you can download the plugin to take Snaptrude elements into Revit or bring Revit elements into Snaptrude. Hope that answers. And Maria has a question about, can you please show the PDF? And this presentation is going to be on the website. Yes, we'll send you an email as well as on the YouTube channel, it will be available. And also, I think in our workflows page, we will publish this on our website as well. So you can find it in a few places. But anyways, we will definitely drop an email with the presentation, which Taylor did here. Taylor, you're on mute, by the way. Taylor, you're on mute.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened. I guess I did it, but I wasn't paying attention. So this is basically actually just pulled directly from Excel. So you can format these as you need. This is actually a Snaptrude export. So we created a program from another project and actually used it for multiple projects. And so we've essentially just pulled it out from there. But that's one of the benefits of this is like, you don't have to format it in any way. It'll do all the interpretation on the back end for how to convert those two spaces. And then as you need, you take full control over that. So if you're close to the output that you need, but some spaces are slightly off, then you jump into program mode and you change those as you need. So the whole point with this is being able to go from 0 to 1 much quicker than previously, where you would have to manually have one screen with the sheet, one screen with the model, baselining the areas or drawing areas in Revit, right? This gives you that opportunity to just instantly set those targets, and you don't need to go format them in a specific way. Because I think that formatting something for data interoperability is probably one of the most unfun things you can do. So this will just take it as it is, convert it, and then it'll give you the assumptions that it had to make. If you don't provide certain information, it'll say, this info wasn't provided, we had to assume this. And then that's where some of the nuances will come in, and where architects and their expertise come in and make sure that the outputs are what you would put forward as an output so that you can fine tune it as needed.
Awesome. There were a couple of more questions which I've answered. If you want to get electrical plumbing, you can import it from Revit. Of course, you can. And there was one question on when is going to be the first update of art. I think this is pertaining to the design competition. I think the dates have been towards the October end is when the submissions are. We can drop, I'll ask like the team to drop in an email updating when the exact dates are. Yes, October 23rd is the submission deadline. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll drop off. We went a little overboard and started a little late, but thanks so much for sticking till the end. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.